Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Tuesday, November 18th, 2025, the 322nd day of the year, the third of 4 Tuesdays this month, as we inch up on Thanksgiving, which, by the way, is going to cost a little bit less this year than last year. And it's a big Tuesday news day in the nation's capital. President Trump is hosting the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia at the White House today with a full schedule of events throughout the day, including a dinner event with the First Lady in the East Room tonight. Among other things, the president is pressing the Saudis on Gaza and their big investment in U.S. artificial intelligence. There is also some news concerning Gaza today, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But on Capitol Hill, the House will finally vote on the bill that would finally release all of the Epstein files, which would be the beginning of us finally moving beyond all of this. Let's start with the president's comments in the Oval Office yesterday.
You urged House Republicans to vote in favor of this Epstein release bill they're going to vote on tomorrow. I just want to be super clear on your position. Do you want to see that pass the Senate? Would you sign that bill if it gets to your desk?
I do want to. Here's what I want. We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats. You look at this Reid Hoffman, you look at Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, they went to his island all the time, and many others. They're all Democrats. All I want for people to recognize a great job that I've done on pricing, on affordability, because we brought prices way down, but they're going way lower, on energy, on ending 8 wars and another one coming pretty soon, I believe. We've done a great job. And I hate to see that deflect from the great job we've done. So I'm all for it. You know, we've already given 50,000 pages. You do know that. Unfortunately, like with the Kennedy situation, with the Martin Luther King situation, not to put Jeffrey Epstein in the same category, but no matter what we give, it's never enough. You know, with Kennedy, we gave everything and it wasn't enough. With Martin Luther King, we gave everything and it's never enough. We've already given, I believe the number is 50,000 pages, 50,000 pages. And it's just a Russia hoax as it pertains to the Republicans. Now, I believe that some of the people that we mentioned are being looked at very seriously for their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. But they were with him all the time. I wasn't at all. And we'll see what happens. What I just don't want Epstein to do is detract from the great success of the Republican Party, including the fact that the Democrats are totally blamed for the shutdown. You know, they cost our country hundreds of billions of dollars with that, at a lot of inconvenience. So I'm for I don't. They can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much, because honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends, all of them. And it's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. And I don't want to take it away from really the greatness of what the Republican Party has accomplished over the last period of time. Yeah,
Mr. President, on affordability.
So that was in yesterday's Oval Office meeting with FIFA executives after the president had encouraged Republicans to sign the bill. More from Rob Schmitt.
The DOJ would have 30 days to release all Epstein files in an easily searchable format. It is a sigh of relief for many Trump supporters who've been disappointed in the lack of transparency on Epstein and the weird responses to it. Typically a very transparent White House. And everyone knows that the government has been hiding something about this scandal for a very long time. And it's come from both sides of the aisle. And this is the stuff that people hate about government. After the House votes tomorrow, the bill goes to the Senate. Trump's sudden switch to fully supporting the release, though, is being covered in the media as some kind of capitulation to his own party. But the same people claiming this also claim that the files are going to expose the president was involved in Epstein's perversions, people like Chris Murphy.
true that Donald Trump is trying to cover up for, I think, a host of really powerful and rich people, but he's frankly not that selfless. He wouldn't be going through all of this effort to try to stop the release of these files if he wasn't seriously implicated in those files. This is most likely the biggest corruption scandal in the history of the country.
He's about as gross as Swalwell at this point. So Trump's in the files, right? It's the greatest scandal in history. But when the authorization to dump all this information out arrives at his desk, he's just going to sign the bill? That's what Trump said unequivocally today in the Oval Office. He's going to sign it. They're going to do the full release. Described by former Meet the Press host turned irrelevant podcaster Chuck Todd as Trump flailing. Take a listen.
We have a president who is in the midst of a feeding frenzy, and it is a feeding frenzy that he can't control, and he is flailing. We've been in these positions with him before, and he always navigates his way out of it.
They are so obsessed with the idea that there are just tremendous amounts of perversions from our president inside of these files. And this time it's different, he says, right? After 10 years of Trump, he's finally going down with this. Chuck Todd, the latest former mainstream media host, whose next move proved exactly why he was fired as he sits in his bedroom spewing Democrat talking points. Anybody who thinks the Epstein files contains a wealth of perversions committed by our president is just politically unintelligent. For 4 years, all of this information, as you know, was in the hands of a very partisan Democrat-run DOJ, a DOJ which attacked conservatives in many ways purely for politics, a DOJ that tried to imprison the man who's now the president of the United States to keep him from that job. It would have been far easier to just leak a couple documents, explicit documents, and turn Trump into a societal pariah if those documents existed.
After having control of all of this for 4 years, the Democrats have now completely hitched their wagon to this, along with the mainstream media, like they did with the Stormy Daniels case and Michael Cohen, the election interference cases, January 6th, the made-up case against the Trump Organization in New York, Russia, and a dozen other failed attempts to bring him down. And now he's the president. Rob also had a great conversation about this with Florida Republican Representative Paulina Luna, a member of the House Oversight Committee.
This from Politico today, that they wrote that Trump has blinked on Epstein as GOP rebels. Is that how you would classify what we saw from the president over the weekend?
No, in fact, I believe on Friday he actually made a statement that Republicans should vote for the release of the files. But I think President Trump knows, and he's been messaging, his message on this has stayed consistent, and that he understands that this, from the get-go, has really been something that the Democrats chose to weaponize against him. Remember, when Biden was president, there was not a peep. And of course, last year, I believe it was in November, when Senator Marsha Blackburn actually went to get the fight logs released, it was a Democrat senator that actually voted to block those release of the logs. And then, as you saw recently, this past week, Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee actually made a motion to release those files, and Democrats also voted to block that. So, in my opinion, the Democrats have been, again, using this as a political hot potato. They actually have no intention of receiving justice for the victims. But, of course, after President Trump's tweet, where he actually pointed out also, not to mention Reid Hoffman and Bill Clinton also being implicated, but I actually just found out from our investigators over at Oversight that the Clintons are actually refusing to come forward and testify. And so that's going to be interesting thing. I think they'll be hit with the subpoena here pretty soon.
Yeah, well, that was just going to ask you about that, because that was your latest tweet on X, was that they won't testify. So, I mean, Clinton has clearly got, an affiliation with Epstein and spent a lot of time with him, and neither of them they're going to force you to come get him, huh?
I guess so. But what's crazy about this whole thing is the Democrats have made no comment on this, nor are they making any comment on the fact that a member of Congress, Plaskett, had actually been texting back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein to try to get dirt on the president during impeachment trials. And so they want to try to pretend like they're fighting for victims. But when it comes to calling out their own party for the involved ties to Jeffrey Epstein, they want nothing to do with it.
It is so interesting that, I'm of the of the group that believes that if especially with Biden's very weaponized DOJ that had these files for all of those years, that if there was anything really dirty on the president, it certainly would have come out, because they tried every other possible maneuver, including bankrupting him and putting him in jail to keep him out of the White House. So there's not going to be any grand revelation. But I guess my question to you is this, just to finalize it. This White House, in my opinion, doesn't want to release these files. Like, they don't have an interest in doing this. The previous White House did not want to release these files either. I don't think either White House really wants to do this. Why do you think that is?
Well, I can tell you, based on what we found actually in February of this past year, we actually found out from a whistleblower that came forward that under the former deputy director of the FBI, there was destruction of evidence specifically pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein. I'd actually forwarded that information off to the FBI. And it was interesting because back in January and February timeframe when I was looking into this, not one member of Congress wanted to get involved in any of that. And so I have forwarded that. And to my understanding, the FBI is currently involved in an investigation. But this White House has been the only administration that's actually released now over 50,000 pages of evidence, also compiled previously filed evidence where you would have had to gone in person to get this. And so it's not that there's something to hide, but I think the president is accurate in saying that this information that they've released, when you look at the people involved, the levels of people that are implicated, I mean, you're absolutely correct. If they had anything on the president, they would have used it. They have nothing, and they're still making it up, trying to imply that he was somehow involved. And the fact is that I do believe that this has been weaponized against the administration to draw away focus and attention on the fact that the Democrats have no platform. They're running Democrat socialists left and right. They literally cheered on the execution of Charlie Kirk, and they're literally trying not to talk about the issues.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but you do agree with me that there's obviously more names and people that are in this thing. And I only got about 20 seconds left, but it does seem like, I mean, everybody thinks there's more to this, right? We all agree on that. And yet there's, this administration has been more open than any other, but there's still not that they don't want to dump it out, or else they would have just dumped it out. What is the problem? Why is it that this is a bipartisan issue?
Well, I can tell you from my work on oversight, we're doing everything that we can, but we have released all the documentation that's been given to us from the Department of Justice. And in addition, remember, there's still an open pending lawsuit with Deutsche Bank and some of these Epstein client victims. And so whenever we actually had met with the victims themselves, we actually asked for those names, and they promised to give them to us. And I actually just checked back in with oversight earlier today, and we've still not received those names. So I definitely think that there's more people involved, but I think that kind of gets hairy, especially when you have a pending lawsuit in regards to what information can be shared, et cetera, and not using our positions to tip the outcomes of that lawsuit.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I commend you for this. Also, the work you're doing on stock trading, trying to get rid of that as well. These are very, very good ideas from the people of this country. Not as popular where you are, but very good ideas from the people of this country that put you there. And thank you so much for the transparency, Congresswoman Paulina Luna. Thank you.
Florida Congresswoman Paulina Luna, a member of the House Oversight Committee. She's also pushing for the release of NASA files on UFOs, or UAPs, as the government wants to call them now, which I featured on the Newsmax Daily one day last week. So this may sound really crazy, but if you've been paying close attention to all of this Epstein stuff all along, President Trump said a long time ago that releasing the files could severely hurt people. I don't know if those were the exact words that he used, but you probably remember that. He said it would be very, very damaging to some people or severely hurt people. He has also said on numerous occasions that he always liked Bill Clinton, and way back when, Bill Clinton was always nice to him. I'm sure you've heard him say that at some point in time. Likely why he didn't bring charges against Hillary Clinton during his first term, even after all the lock her up, right? He said she was the wife, the first lady, the Secretary of State, and all that. Even yesterday, he mentioned the Clintons' ties to Epstein. So I know this is crazy, but I'm thinking, could Trump's earlier opposition to not wanting to release the files possibly be him trying to protect Bill Clinton and maybe others in some way? More from Rob Finnerty.
It's also important to note that whenever Democrats need to change the subject, they bring up two words. One's Jeffrey, the other's Epstein. Even though the only real evidence linking an American president to Jeffrey Epstein and all of those underage girls doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump, it has everything to do with Bill Clinton. Democrats never seem to bring that part of the story up. And they never mention that when the FBI searched Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse in New York City, a large painting of Bill Clinton wearing a blue Monica Lewinsky dress was found hanging on the wall in the living room, pointing, with red high heels on. Again, Bill Clinton, not Donald Trump, wearing high heels. But somehow this is a Donald Trump story. Again, the worst they've got Donald Trump on here is their accusation that maybe he knew that Jeffrey Epstein was up to no good. But the worst they've accused Bill Clinton of is actually being up to no good with Jeffrey Epstein. Why is nobody talking about this? Somehow this is still a Donald Trump story and not a Bill Clinton story. I don't get that. Again, all of this is a distraction from everything else that's going on.
There you go. Rob Finnerty is the host of Finnerty, 8 p.m. Eastern. And let's go to Frontline, 6 p.m. Eastern, with host Carl Higbie, who has receipts.
The White House has tried to release the Epstein files, and they were sealed by 3 separate judges. Ironically, all appointed by Democrats on 3 separate occasions. Check out who blocked this each time. This is actually amazing, folks. July 23rd, 2025, release blocked by Robin L. Rosenberg, the Southern District of Florida, appointed by Barack Obama in 2014. That's weird. Denied unsealing the grand jury transcripts from Epstein's 2005 to 2007 Florida federal investigation, ruling that the request fell outside judicial proceedings and violated state secrecy guidelines, and declined to transfer the case back up to New York. August 11th, just a month later, 2025, blocked again by Paul A. Engelmeyer, Southern District of New York, rejecting unsealing of grand jury materials from Ghislaine Maxwell's case, stating that they contained no new information. And, they said it was a risk of unraveling secrecy without sufficient justification. That's pretty weird, because another judge just released all the grand jury information to Comey's team, which you would think, since Comey is, alive and stuff, unlike Epstein, would be even more unprecedented. But whatevs. Anyway, the third time, on August 20th, 2025, Richard M. Berman, Southern District of New York, denied unsealing of grand jury transcripts and exhibits from the Epstein 2019 indictment, calling the DOJ's motion a diversion from its own and unreleasing files, emphasized threats to victim safety and privacy, even though all those names just would have been redacted. But yet, here we are, and the people who tried to get on this early, like Massey, were made out to be demons.
Massey being Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massey, whose big push for the release of the files essentially led to today's vote. It is going to be interesting, very interesting, to see who does not vote in favor of releasing the files today, if anyone, and what their excuse may be. Let's shift gears to the case against former FBI Director James Comey. Yesterday, the federal judge overseeing the case granted a request from federal prosecutors to block a magistrate judge's order that mandated they hand over grand jury evidence to Comey's attorneys. This gets very confusing, but Comey's attorneys allege that the Trump-appointed attorney Lindsay Halligan in Eastern Virginia made, quote, fundamental mistakes of the law that could compromise the integrity of the grand jury process. You remember the grand jury voted to bring the charges. Bianca De La Garza spoke with our senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano.
So a judge has ruled that there were disturbing patterns of profound investigative missteps when the DOJ secured the indictment. They are looking at grand jury materials. It's a 24-page opinion, Judge, but basically what it boils down to is that they believe potentially privileged communications were used with that grand jury, and they're seeing unexplained irregularities in the transcript. Comey's lawyers wanted the transcripts. There were concerns of irregularities. They say it may have tainted the case. We know this is also going with the other track. There's a whole other judge hearing whether or not Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor, the U.S. attorney interim, was inappropriately put in. So this is another sort of win, if you will, if this judge is saying, hey, the grand jury irregularities. Do you think this is going to be a bigger issue as it comes forward? Or does the DOJ have an argument now to come back and say, this is why we used it to get the indictment? Here's how we explain the grand jury inconsistencies.
Well, there's more than one grand jury here, because the first grand jury refused to indict James Comey. So the Comey defense lawyers are looking for what was told to that grand jury and how they deliberated and how they ruled, and they're looking for the same information from the second grand jury. The second grand jury, the one that did indict him, had one presenter before them, and that was U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, her third day on the job. If she is found to have been invalidly appointed, no fault of hers, but if she's found to have been invalidly appointed, then the indictment is dismissed, and they cannot get a new indictment because the statute of limitations has expired. If she is found to have been validly appointed, then this issue of the grand jury transcripts comes into play. What did she tell the grand jury? She had no experience with grand juries prior to this one. And what was told to the first grand jury that decided not to indict him? I have to tell you, Bianca, it is very, very rare for grand jury materials to be released to defense counsel unless someone is about to testify in trial who also testified before the grand jury. So something is amiss here. We don't know exactly what it was that this judge ordered. The most secretive things we have, aside from national security secrets, grand jury testimony to be released.
Right. They won't even get Jeffrey Epstein's. And so you have to wonder the political, tilt of a judge who, as you just said, is willing to release something which is never supposed to be released.
Bianca De La Garza with Newsmax senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. And again, after that segment, a federal judge blocked the judge's order to hand over the grand jury stuff, giving the government until 5 p.m. tomorrow, 5 p.m. Wednesday, to file objections to the order. All right, back at the open, I said I had more on Gaza. You didn't hear much about this yesterday because of all the noise in the media, but the United Nations Security Council voted 13-0 to approve President Trump's 20-point plan for sustainable peace and the reconstruction of Gaza that begins with a board of peace. Russia and China abstained from the vote, but they did decline using their veto power to block the measure entirely. Trump acknowledged the vote on social media by posting congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace in capital letters, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. Part of what Trump will be talking to the Saudi crown prince and prime minister about today. And this is a couple days old now, but when I reported the story about the BBC, I think it was last Monday, I said President Trump will probably sue them. And going back to Friday, he said he is moving forward with a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the BBC, accusing them of defaming him by manipulating a key portion of his January 6, 2021 speech in a documentary. If you missed the story, some big BBC executive, maybe the president of the network and the head of news, they both resigned. It was over the weekend. I think it was last Sunday, after they were accused of manipulating the video, editing it, leaving out the part that everybody else left out when Trump said, peacefully protest. On Wall Street, stocks continued to slide after closing sharply lower yesterday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down more than 300 points at the open this morning after closing about 500 points lower yesterday. Bitcoin and most other major cryptocurrencies also sharply lower as well. Bitcoin has plummeted to just under 90,000. I'm going to say it was a month-ish, Bitcoin was at 125K. You're probably saying the same thing I'm saying, that maybe a month ago or so at 125K I should have sold. But a year or two from now, it also might be 225K. So it's a big day at the White House, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, and it's all eyes on the House, at least until the vote on the Epstein files happens. And since I wasn't here yesterday, I was glad to see ICE on the ground in Charlotte, North Carolina, and today there's word from the administration that ICE agents will be making their way to Raleigh, North Carolina as well. Be sure to keep up with all of today's news on Newsmax and to it at newsmax.com. Also, make sure you have the app on your phone so you can stay up to date anywhere, anytime. The news starts each and every day, 6 o'clock Eastern with Wake Up America Early Edition, followed by Wake Up America National Report. all the way through Frontline with Carl Higbie at 6, Rob Schmitt Tonight, Finnerty, Greg Kelly, The Right Squad, and much, much more. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening and sharing the Newsmax Daily. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, whatever, at radio_Marino. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.